Ever since I put out the video about what I did that messed up my progress in 2022, I've been getting anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 questions per day asking in some capacity or another about how lean you should get before you bulk, what the advantages are, and I just have to say that the vast majority of you are misapplying this information. So I wanted to make a separate video about this, but instead I'm just going to address it here. And what that topic is that I'm going to address is very simply this. Bulking, when you are natural versus enhanced, is a very, very different thing, and you have to approach it with completely different sets of optimal parameters. Reason number one that this is the case is because naturals can actually tank their sex hormone levels if they get too lean, and this goes for both males and females. There have been case studies on males that have competed and they had their testosterone levels measured, and the levels were often below 100 nanograms per deciliter. I know there's different sets of units in different places in the world, but basically that's something like less than 1/3 of the natural range, the minimum level in the natural range. And if you had those testosterone levels normally, you would be put on TRT by most doctors. And this happens to natural males somewhere below 10% body fat or so. For females, it's somewhere in the mid-teen range, like below 15 to 16%. Now, this isn't a black or white thing. It's not binary. It's not like the second that you drop below 10%, your testosterone levels drop to zero. It is a continuum. There's a slight decline that gets significantly worse as you approach true bodybuilding levels of contest leanness. And by the time that you're down around 5 to 6%, a lot of people are going to have significantly worse sex hormone levels to the point that it will be suboptimal for gaining muscle and strength. Obviously, the main implications of this are that most naturals should not get too lean before starting a bulk, especially if they don't compete. If they compete, obviously they have to get lean to get on stage and be competitive. But if they don't compete, it really doesn't even make sense to get super lean into the low single digits unless that's what you want to do for some reason. Now, this is very different from enhanced competitors because obviously enhanced competitors are using exogenous sources of sex hormones, meaning that they can control those levels by how much sex hormones that they simply inject into themselves. They have full control over this aspect and they don't need to rely on their natural production. So at least as far as sex hormones are concerned, leanness isn't a factor for enhanced athletes. Now, the second huge difference between enhanced and natural competitors in terms of optimal bulking has to do with insulin sensitivity. And the main reason that there's a big difference in insulin sensitivity between the two groups comes down to the use of human growth hormone. The three biggest factors that are going to affect the insulin sensitivity of a particular bodybuilder outside of genetics, an enhanced bodybuilder, are going to come down to 1, the carbohydrate levels that they consume on a daily basis, 2, their body fat levels, and 3, how much human growth hormone that they use. If you use enough human growth hormone, even if you have relatively low carbohydrate intake and you are very lean, it's possible to use so much HGH that alone pushes you into a poor insulin sensitivity range. Most enhanced competitive bodybuilders are going to be using relatively high doses of anabolics and HGH because that's what's required to get big. And because they are trying to get big, they usually are succeeding in some fashion or another, which is why your average enhanced bodybuilder might weigh more like 200 to 250 pounds compared to the average natural bodybuilder, which will more likely be in the 150 to 200 pound range. And because they're on average maybe 50 pounds heavier or so, that is going to necessitate much larger calorie intakes to grow. And much larger calorie intakes, because of insulin sensitivity, mean much higher carbohydrate intakes as well. So bodybuilders cannot get around the use of HGH or high carbohydrate intakes because they're big and they weigh a lot. So they have to rely on low body fat levels and cardio and a healthy lifestyle. Now, obviously, there are drugs or supplements that can improve insulin sensitivity, such as metformin or berberine and some various other things. But at the end of the day, the enhanced bodybuilder's main tool, unless they want to quit HGH, which they can't, to keep insulin sensitive is to keep low body fat. Now, let's compare this to the insulin sensitivity situation for naturals. Basically, unless a natural gets so fat that they induce type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome, insulin sensitivity is basically not a factor because you're not using HGH. So even anywhere for a male between, say, that 10 to 12% minimum before sex hormone levels start to tank, and really body fat levels as high as anywhere from 20 to 30%, depending on your genetics, are not going to have a substantially negative impact on insulin sensitivity levels to the point that it will really hurt your bulking results. Very different from enhanced. Now, I understand that some of you are probably going to want to call BS on that, but that's not just my opinion. Greg Nuckols has done an independent review of the literature on this, and he was unable to tease out meaningful statistical differences between the results of naturals bulking above 20% and those bulking in the what's normally called optimal zone of like 10 to 15%. It just doesn't appear to affect P ratio, and P ratio is basically the amount per pound gain that is muscle versus fat. It just doesn't really seem to get significantly worse even when naturals get pretty fat. And that's very, very different than enhanced because, again, HGH. Before I bring this to a whole, I want to talk about one third and final consideration that applies to both natural and enhanced individuals, and that is whether or not you compete, as this is a game changer, especially for naturals. Because here's the problem. If you get too far above a reasonable stage weight, you're going to run into a situation where your competition prep might require you to lose 40 or even 50 pounds of pure fat, because most people are simply far fatter than they think they are. And if you have to lose 50 pounds of weight across, say, a 20 or even 24-week prep, you're going to run the risk of serious muscle loss. By now, you've all heard the standard advice that if you want to maintain the most amount of muscle and strength during a diet phase, you should lose body weight at approximately 1% to 0.5% of your current body weight weekly. But you need to keep in mind that if your goal is to get on stage and be exotically lean, competitively lean, once you get under 10% body fat or so as a male and into the teens as a female, you need to start going closer to that 0.5% of body weight per week to really give you the best chance to hold on to as much strength and size as possible. If you've set yourself up for a 40 or a 50 pound prep where you need to average losing more than 2 pounds a week, you're not going to have that luxury, and inevitably it's going to cost you serious size and strength in your prep. And it's something that you want to avoid. Long diets just blow. So let's bring this all together. Why is it beneficial to get to a lean starting point? Well, if you're natural, it's not. Unless you're planning to compete as a natural, males should probably avoid going below about 10 to 12% body fat and about 16 to 18% body fat for females in order to avoid declines in sex hormone production, which can affect the efficiency of your bulk. However, this concern does not exist for enhanced lifters because they are essentially replacing their endogenous hormone production with stuff that they inject. Second, because enhanced bodybuilders use HGH, and because they're generally big and eat a ton of carbs, insulin sensitivity is an issue. For the exact same reasons, no HGH, not being as big, it's not for natural. So enhanced lifters can afford to get very lean, and in fact, it helps them solve some of the insulin sensitivity issue. Additionally, because more enhanced bodybuilders are going to compete, why else would you sacrifice your health? It makes more sense for them, from a competitive logistical standpoint, to not get too fat and risk a very long, very hard prep where they have to diet too fast and lose muscle. So for the enhanced lifter, starting leaner means it's easier to prep, you'll lose less muscle in prep, and it means your bulk will be more efficient and you'll gain more muscle. For all the reasons I've already talked about, this is not the case for natural lifters. Natural lifters do not benefit from getting to a truly lean, low single digit starting point. However, they still may want to get reasonably lean before they bulk so that they have a longer runway for their bulk and they don't have to end their bulks too soon or get too fat during their bulks. So, in very simple terms, here are my final recommendations. If you are an enhanced bodybuilder, you don't want to get too much more than 10% body fat above your stage condition, which for males is probably going to limit you somewhere between 14 to 15% body fat. And for females, maybe that's more like 20% to 23% body fat or so. For naturals, you don't want to get too lean and tank your sex hormone production, but you want to get lean enough to have a nice long runway for your bulk so that your bulk isn't too short, so you don't have enough momentum and time to get a lot of strength gains, and so that you don't end up too fat at the end of your bulk. In practice, this means males should probably get to about 10 to 12% body fat before they start a bulk, and they should probably end those bulks around 16 to 20% body fat. For females, simply add 6 to 8% to these figures. Hope that helped all of you understand the differences between bulking naturally and enhanced.